Cool. We are live now. Oh. Yeah, so good morning, one hour present over here, and we are going. My mic is not working, I guess. Okay, no issue. Uh, so good morning, one and all present over here, and let's start over the session because I have some issue in my mic. So today's session is here on the transform data with AWS data view. So I hand over the session to Sanchit. So over to you, Sanchit.
Thank you. Thanks, Nipun. Thank you so much for giving me this pleasure and this platform to go about and share my knowledge with the larger community here around what exactly is AWS DataBrew Glue and how it works, how it simplifies the entire life of a couple of other kinds of folks what we have, right, when you're working in and out on the data. So let me jump on to today's session, right? So today, as Nipun mentioned, we'll work around transform data with AWS DataBrew Glue, right? The agenda for today's session will be around the introduction, overview of DataBrew, a demo, and a Q&A section, right? So please feel free to put all of your questions into the chat as we go through the sessions, or at the last, I will ensure that I'll go through all the possible sorts of questions. And if there is any queries, we can interact, we can brainstorm around it, and if required, we can also discuss that offline. Before we jump onto the introduction part of it, let me talk about myself. My name is Sanchit. I work as a lead architect at Quantify. I am an AWS ambassador as well as an community builder. Love to work with different communities. Have done a couple of sessions with different meetup groups, as well as been working with in and out with different communities to share my knowledge, my experience, which I've gathered across this industry for last couple of years, working in this cloud era, entire cloud setup. If you have any questions, any queries around how you should look forward, how to shape your career on cloud, or any specific technology, please feel free to reach out to me over LinkedIn or on GitHub. I'll be happy to help you out as and when I get a chance around it. The session, just want to call it out, the presentation, the scripts, what we will be using in this session, the same will be have uploaded in the public GitHub repository. The link of that particular repository will post it into will be shared by Nupun, as well as it will be shared under the YouTube channel where this video will be uploaded. So you can refer the thing, you can try to recreate at your end, and if you find any hiccups, for sure you can reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you out with that. Let's understand what's exactly DataBrew is there, right? But before we jump and actually start around how it simplifies the life of people or data analyst or any kind of person who's working in and out, but let's understand why, first of all, do we need such kinds of stuff, right? In that case, AWS is always good to understand the ask and the need of the industry. I mean, that's why it's a kind of a leading in the entire cloud quadrant, I would say, that they not only try to come up with a service, but they try to come up a service which simplify the lives of folks, right? So there exactly, if you try to see wherever role you're working around, like in today's world, whether you're working as a machine learning, whether you're working as a kind of an data analyst, you're working in a data lake, or you're working any kind of a role which related to data or data engineering, you will see there is always an ask and a need to come up with a kind of a data with this like a simplified structure. It cleans, it is in a given format, it is consistent, those kinds of couple of things which is an ask from the market, right? Now it's not that easy to get that clean data. There is much more kind of process that needs to be done, right? Either you have to write the Python code to do it, or you have to write some kind of a glue scripts or some kind of a big data scripts to do it, or some kind of a machine learning. Based on the kind of role which you are into, you will pick up any of the programming language or supportive framework to cleanse that data, right? There exactly Brew comes up to help you out, right? Where we generally see that most of the people, 50% of the time, the entire processing, let's say if I talk about, you want to just create a visualization chart in any sorts of BI platform, right? So let's say anything, which is QuickSight, Tableau, Power BI, blah, blah, you can have anything. Let's say if you want to do that kind of a stuff, 50% of your entire duration you will only spend cleansing your data. Now cleansing your data is like ensuring all the column data types are right, all the columns are right, you need to merge, join, or have that data prep activity in place, so then you can finally plug that entire grid, which is final, and then create a visualization. The time taken to create visualization is just like 35 to 40% of it. 50% of the time is spent purely in cleansing the data. There, Amazon identified the need to simplify these processes to ensure that this activity is not a tedious job, but is more like a drag and drop and a simplified approach. With that thought process, AWS invented DataBrew in November 2020 with an intent to purely focus on the business use case rather than really worrying about how to prep the data and some other activities like writing the code or other stuff, right? But still, you need to understand the data. That's the core crux, right? If you don't understand your data, it's DataBrew, it's programming code, or even it's visualization. Nothing will able to help you unless you understand, okay, given in a data set, I have X number of columns, X column stands for what, and Y number of rows. So that understanding for sure you need to have it, but the kind of effort that you need in terms of cleansing that get very simplified, it's almost like gets eliminated with help of DataBrew. So that's exactly what you can see. And from the memes, what we on the meme on the right hand side, you can easily verify that everyone wants to look forward for the clean data, but really who wants to clean the data? There are very less number of people who really wants to take that pain to go through the data, write scripts, keep writing iterative scripts unless you get the right data, because it's a very iterative and tedious project. So that's what we today's, I mean, I would say the need and the ask of industry is, and that's how you'll see the DataBrew is a very picking up service in the market in last few months itself. Now let's understand what's exactly Glue DataBrew is, right? We have understood the crux of it, that okay, why you need that service, but let's understand how exact what service is, what are the different functionality and capability of it, right? So DataBrew is more like a no-code visualization tool that makes it easy for data analysts, data science, or any person who's playing around with data to interact with data with drag and drop capability, point and click visualization, user interface without any writing of code. That's like a no code kind of a thing, right? So if you are a kind of a person who's working as like a data analyst or data scientist or any kind of data engineer related job, which is dealing in and out of data, there exactly DataBrew can help you to simplify entire data preparation activity without writing a single line of code, with couple of things with just drag and drop kind of a functionality and with a elegant kind of an UI which help you to conduct that entire activity. From terms of the couple of capabilities, I would say profiling, cleansing, normalizing, data lineage, automate the entire jobs. Those are the couple of capabilities which you do in and out, right? Outside to this, there are other things, right? Let's say understanding your data, which is like profiling, or let's say you have to split the data, merge the data, or you have to do joins between two data sets. Those kinds of activities are very frequent where you write SQL queries to do it, or if it is data set is smaller, if it is bigger, you start writing Python code in data frames and all kinds of different stuff you do to make that data prep, which get very simplified within click with help of DataBrew. And on the need perspective, I think we also understood in the previous slide, 80% will be spent in preparing the data, right?
Sanchit,
I
sorry to interrupt you. I think your slide is not visible. You have not shared it.
Cool. So 80% of your data preparation goes in simply just prepping up the data, which is like a time consuming, very expensive in terms of the effort, as well as the time taken and the resource cost. And as well as it's very manual. So you cannot even automate that thing unless you write some code and that code runs in like a cron job or those kinds of other fashion. Then that's a way to automate that thing. Otherwise, it's very manual. If you're, let's say, going around with Excel and doing the stuff, it's very manual and you cannot automate it. So those are the couple of things you would say from a DataBrew perspective, that its capability just help you to simplify all these manual processes, and how it is becoming an, I mean, those were like a kind of an overhead when you work around with couple of other data projects, right? So that's about the need about what exactly is a DataBrew and how exactly it works, right? So when it comes to working of DataBrew currently provides 250 plus inbuilt transformation. When I say transformation is any kind of processing which you do on data. Let it be a very simple one that you're just splitting a column, or let it be a very complex one where you're joining, merging, or analyzing your data set, right? Those kinds of complex operation. There is a bag of inbuilt transformation of 250 are provided by DataBrew to operate, to plug on your data set without writing a single line of code, right? So that's one. It also provides or automatically recommends you things like filtering anomalies, correcting invalid, incorrect fields, right? Or identifying the duplicate data, normalizing the data based on date, time, those kinds of other operation which it does on top, outside providing the transformation. And all this takes place with the help of the machine learning capability which is plugged in DataBrew under behind the scene. So this entire, whether we talk about the inbuilt transformation or we talk about the different other advanced functionality, everything has been driven by machine learning capability which Brew's provided, or Brew have just encapsulated from the normal user, that you don't have to worry about those machine learning or complex model. We'll take care. You just have to drag and drop, choose what right works given your data set, and based on the output, you just go and process and work around it, right? So that's how it simplifies and encapsulate the entire complexity from the end user. And as well as to make it more an automated perspective, it provides things like recipe, right? So whatever the action you take on the data, it get captured in form like a recipe, and recipe is nothing like a script, right? You can take about, let's say, any script which you talk about. Similarly, a kind of recipe is like kind of an cookbook or kind of a JSON file where it stores all the steps that, okay, this column needs to be changed in this fashion, Y column needs to be changed in Z fashion. Those kinds of steps it document, and the documentation or that script is called, or file is called as recipe. No worries, we'll have a detailed walkthrough or a demo where we'll understand what is recipe in detail. And when it comes to from an input and output perspective, it supports all the most of the standard things what we use in industry, where it is CSV, if we talk about JSON, Apache Parquet, nested Parquet, Excel sheets. Those are the standard things it supports when it comes to the input perspective. And from output perspective, it supports things like, again, CSV, JSON, Parquet, Avro, ORC, XML. So those things, it supports everything. So let's say even if you're working on data lake, there's things like Avro, ORC, a pretty common standard where you use. So even it can help you from data lake perspective also to cleanse your entire complex data and larger volume of data to simplify your entire development cycle and the development time taken. So that's about how it works. This is like an overview of the entire DataBrew, right? So if you try to go from left to right here, so you can see different sources what you have on the left side, like data lake. If we talk about local files, S3, data catalog, Redshift, Aurora, or any data source with JDBC connection, which covers most of the stuff like SQL Server and all the thing, right? Where you have the entire data source, and on the left side, on the right side or at the center, you will see that you have different capabilities of DataBrew, which includes select data, build recipe, join data, or schedule. And these are the couple of operations which I mentioned about 250 transformation. So these are the couple of operations which Brew can perform, like remove nulls, missing values, filtering of that, conversions of lower to uppercase, schema type mismatch, remove any missing columns, add suffix, prefix, delete rows, delete columns. Couple of like 250 plus, as we all understand it, there are a couple of other different kinds of operations which are provided. And at the end, on the destination side, you can see, like, with help of clean data store, recipe, data profiling, data quality, lineage, these are the capabilities which are provided by a glue, and the output you can leverage is like you can get a very good insights. You can have a reporting on QuickSight, you can have SageMaker notebook, which is like a machine learning models which are running on it, and as well as an ETL or ML pipeline where you need to have a data prep, right? So if I talk about currently, right, when you do any machine learning model, the first and foremost thing is defining the problem statement, right? The second thing, immediately what you do is you try to analyze your data set. Like, you don't start writing your machine learning model first. What you first step do is, what is the kind of data I'm getting as an input? What is an output I need? And you start analyzing based on a given input data set. Is that is correct? or how much percent it is accurate, how much percent it covers different scenario. You try to identify different patterns from it. There exactly you spend most of the time to analyze your data set, and with help of services like DataBrew, it get much more simplified, because there are things like data profiling has been there, or those kinds of schemas and grids that analyze your data set in very detail. So you just have to provide the right schema to it, and Glue will help you to understand and analyze your data and get you an entire heat map kind of an output. So you get very detailed understanding how your data set look like in terms of the quality, in terms of the missing value, in terms of the data type for the columns. So you get, you reduce the entire or simplify the entire process that takes place in the manual approach. So that's how the beauty of this service is, and why people or everyone should look forward when you're working as a data analyst or any sorts of data science role. The advantage, I think I've talked a lot about the advantage in the previous slides. Like the first one, if you start from the anti-clockwise, is the visualization. Data visualization is lineage. It's pretty linear, is like how your data has been moving from one job to one phase to another phase, those kinds of is lineage. It provides you very clear lineage at how exactly your data moved from one step to another step to another step, and where exactly the recipe was brought in, what action has been. So there is a proper lineage here, so you can track the entire flow of your data. It can also integrates with data pipeline, right? So it provides things like SDK and API. That's a common across all the AWS services, that they provide SDKs and APIs. You can write things like Boto 3. In case of Python code, you can write with the Boto 3 to trigger the DataBrew job, to have SDK, to invoke, schedule. So those kinds of operation, what you can do on DataBrew from an operational perspective, you can leverage SDK and API both to integrate with your existing data pipelines. From a data source perspective, we saw in the previous slide, it covers the wide range of data sources. Like we talk about Redshift, we talk about Excel, flat files, we talk about existing data lake, any JDBC connection, or Glue data catalog. It supports all the kinds of stuff. The number of transformation are 250 plus, which is like suffice for any kinds of very simple to complex kind of analysis what you need to do. Plus, it is the best thing, it's very serverless, right? So you don't have to manage the servers, you don't have to manage any sorts of operational activity if your data set is larger, right? Glue DataBrew takes care of everything. The only thing you have to do is provide the source, analyze your data, understand the schema part of it, provide the right transformation, and provide the right destination. This is the 4 things what you have to do, and that is all. Instead of writing previously, you have to write the code, you have to connect, you have to store the output, do multiple iteration after talking to other stakeholders. Those entire thing gets simplified with just few clicks and the few approaches, right? And on top of it, the best thing which has come new in DataBrew recently is it can also be part of your lake formation, right? So lake formation is the entire your secure and compliance way of building data lake. DataBrew can also be one of the service sitting with lake formation. So it simplifies from security and governance perspective also. So if let's say you are working in any company which is dealing with any sorts of regulatory or sensitive data, the entire thing get very simplified even after using DataBrew, because DataBrew can also work with lake formation. So that's about so far what we have understand the basic foundational things like, okay, what is DataBrew? Why do you need it? What advantage, functionality? Now let's get one level down to it. So when we are doing the demo, these are the core concepts I will be using frequently, and there it will be able to help you out to connect the dots, right? So there are 6 major terms I would say when you're working with DataBrew in and out on regular basis. The first one is a data set. So data set is very common to understand, right? The source what you provide, let's say you provide a database, a table, a single file, that is called as a data set. Once you plug into Glue, DataBrew, you tell DataBrew, okay, hey, here is your source. You tell it via help of a data set. You define a data set there. That's one. 2, the project. So the entire project, you can just think of like a folder, okay? Or any normal Java or Python or any sorts of project which you do, where you do all the different actions, right? For defining the data set, recipe, job, lineage, profile. It's like a folder which keep tracks of everything, like a kind of a folder or kind of an encapsulated, I think sandbox, which takes care of everything. Recipe. This is a very key and important concept. Recipe is more like, as I mentioned in the previous slide also, it's like a file which stores all kind of interaction or all kinds of transformation or processing what you have done on a file This is a medium via which you can automatically replay the same kind of interaction on every new similar kind of a data set. What I mean, for example, let's say today you got an Excel file which holds a very simple data set of student, roll number, marks of different subjects. Okay, and there are few students which were not able to give the exams. There are missing values are there. Now, with help of first time when you work on the data set, you just ensure that you cleanse the data, you ensure the schema and all. And from a transformation perspective, you fill out the missing values with help of with replacing with 0. That is an interaction, which interaction get captured in form of a recipe. Now, let's say tomorrow you get another batch of a same file, similar schema for another sets of 100 students with similar problem. Now you, instead of doing this step again of manually going and understanding the data and doing all of the stuff of replacing the values, you can plug a recipe on that data set and request DataBrew to execute the same recipe from your previous execution on the new data set. So this way you can automate it without doing that step again and again, right? Let's say you can do it on one time, twice, thrice, right? If I ask you that you do it for a year or even let's say for 2 months, you won't be able to do it, right? So there exactly recipe is a way of automating that process and it can take care of that stuff. Job is more like what you tell DataBrew, right? That, okay, hey, any new thing which you get in this particular S3 folder or this type of source, you run this recipe. So job is like an instruction which you give to DataBrew. Please execute recipe against similar kind of a data set. So that's what exactly is a job, kind of an instruction. And the best thing is not only you can automate it via jobs, but even you can schedule the jobs. Like what that means is very simple, right? Let's say you know very well that, okay, you're going to receive the files, let's say 12 p.m. IST. You want to execute your DataBrew. So what you can do is you can execute a DataBrew at every 1 p.m. IST. You can schedule it, auto run it. So you don't have to manually sit and trigger the jobs or have things like Lambda and all of the additional complexity there. DataBrew itself can schedule the job with help, schedule it via help of the job. Data lineage, as I mentioned in the previous slide, it's more around a very clean way to track the flow of your data across different phases, right? From connection of source to entire step that took to process the data and finally writing it to the destination. The entire step that has been taken that get captured and tracked so you can preserve that from a compliance or a tracking and visibility perspective. The last is a data profile. Now, data profile is a very important term. Data profile is like understanding your entire data, right? When you do a comparison, right? That, okay, hey, given a set of 5 things, how each thing is looking like. Similarly, data profile does the same thing. It compares the different columns across and different rows to analyze how many rows across columns has a missing value, what is the quality of value, how many are integer columns, how many are string columns, what is the total number of rows. Those kinds of analysis of the data set is done with help of DataBrew. So do remember data set, project, recipe, job, data lineage, and data profile. These are the 6 terms which we'll be using frequently into our demo. So as I was talking about the demo, right? So in the demo, we will be looking at end-to-end flow, like how exactly you need to define a source, you need to create a project or data set, explore, or what we refer as a term is called profile the entire data. So we understand the data, define the recipe and create a DataBrew job, and finally view the entire lineage. So these are the 5 steps we will be looking into the demo. And for the demo, let me switch to our AWS console. Okay, so this is my AWS console. Hope everyone already holds your AWS console. If not, no worries. You can sign up for free console and you can repeat the steps which I'm demonstrating in this particular tutorial, and you can refer it and do it at your own. And no worries, in case also if you're not able to do it, what I have done is each demo, each step what I will be doing here, I've captured in a form of the presentation which you can refer it and you can try to create the same thing. Okay. So as mentioned in the prerequisites, the first, download the data set from this link which is given and upload to S3 bucket, download the CloudFormation template from the link and deploy it. Okay. So these are the same links which are given in the GitHub repository, and same this GitHub repository will be shared with you post this session. So don't worry, you don't have to write any sorts of codes or any sorts of cloud formation template. If you don't know, everything is provided. You just have to clearly follow the instruction given in this manual. So we have already downloaded the data set. The data set is already in local. The cloud formation template is already there, right? So what I'll do is I'll go to the cloud formation. So for the demo, right, I've already tried to create a demo at my own in the morning. So there's already a stack is there, but what we'll do is we'll create another stack. So you understand each detail, what you have to do, right? So first I will upload the stack. Since my stack has been defined locally, okay. So I go to the cloud formation. So here you can see I provided the cloud formation JSON. I'll click on the next. I'll write we can give any logical name, whichever works to identify it, right? So I've provided the name. Rest, all the properties remains default. You don't have to make any change here. Just click on next. And once you click on next, you will be on the review page. We have just provided the template here. Neither we have provided any sorts of parameter, the template name, and that's it. No other changes are required. You have to just click on give your consent, because this template will also launch a permission which will help you to plug your S3 with DataBrew. So that permission will be also deploying in this CloudFormation template. This template will ideally take like a minute or minute and a half. And what is going to do, if I switch back, it's going to launch a CloudFormation stack which holds two things, right? Your IAM role name and your S3 bucket. The IAM role name, as I mentioned, it will help you from a perspective of connecting your S3 bucket with your entire DataBrew, all the operation what you will be doing. And S3 bucket is a bucket what we have created, right? So if I go back and if I just bring the CloudFormation stack for the review, so this is the CloudFormation stack what we have used for this particular one. Here is the IAM role what we have created, which we are just only providing very specific get, put, list, and delete kind of stuff operation on a specific bucket which we have created in the bottom. And this is a kind of a bucket where this is a bucket what we have created, the S3 bucket, and similarly what we have mapped to the IAM policy and created an IAM role for it. So that's what we have created, and the output you will see an S3 bucket and an IAM role. So if I switch back to AWS console now, hopefully the CloudFormation is done. If I go to the output, you can see there is a role name and there is an S3 bucket. So if we go back to our manual, it mentioned once the CloudFormation stack is deployed, please capture the value for role name and S3 bucket, because it will be helpful for your next steps. Now what we will be doing is we will be uploading the data set. The data set will be uploaded to this S3 bucket. So what I'll do is I'll open a new tab, and you can remember that the data set name is DataBrew IAM stack. So we'll go to another tab and we'll go to S3 bucket. So here you can see IAM stack, which is just launched. This bucket is just launched a few minutes back. So I'll click on this. I'll create a new folder here. We can name that anything, whatever you feel is the right naming convention. Just to create a proper hierarchy of the folders, I've given a very logical name, that raw data set, because this is very raw. I haven't done any sorts of processing to it. So raw data set, I've created a folder. Now I'm uploading a file in it. So as you can see, this is a kind of a dummy data set of COVID data from this March 2021, which is there of 2.7 MB. So I'll upload the CSV file and I'll click on upload. Please ensure that when you're uploading it, don't change any kind of a permission, because if you change the permission, it might be publicly available. So do ensure that it is not public, because in actual, when you're working on the data set, it might be a sensitive and confidential data. So do ensure the access are only to this particular bucket to the people who are only authorized, not to everyone. So now we have done our prerequisite step successfully. We have uploaded the dataset to S3. We have deployed the cloud formation, and as well as we have the role name and the S3 bucket. Now let's jump directly to start playing around and get our hands dirty with DataBrew. So as it mentioned, navigate to the DataBrew service. So we'll switch back and we'll do the same thing. So I'll open another window of it, another tab, and I'll click on service DataBrew. So either you can do, since I've already used DataBrew actively, it is there in my recent services, or you can just type here DataBrew and you will see in the drop down. So you can see that I'm at the home page. That's the best thing, that, okay, I'm just starting from scratch. I'm at the home page. And as mentioned in our current documentation, right, that you have to first go to DataBrew service. Strike, we are there. To click on the DataBrew console and select project. So what we'll do is we'll directly go to project from the left navigation and click on create project. Here you can see there is already a project defined in our back, but we'll create a new one. I'll give any logical name. You can follow whatever you love there. Okay, so I've given DataBrew demo. Very simple of it. The data set is already defined. This is of 2 hours ago. We'll define a new data set. So if I go back to our concepts, so far, I mean, this is the first step what you're doing, right? So this is the first step what you're doing. You are currently in the DataBrew service. You have defined the project, right? So project is what we have named as DataBrew-demo. Now,
sorry to interrupt you, Sanchit. Once again, your screen is not visible. I think you have to share it again.
Is my screen visible now?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I'll recap. So first, we have launched the CloudFormation stack, right, which gives us the S3 and IAM role. Second, we were here. What we have done here in the second place is we will be creating a project. Now we went back to the basic concept, right? The project is like a folder which holds everything: your data set, your lineage, profile, your recipe, and everything, like a folder kind of a thing. So what we have done is we have defined the project. When you define the project, by default, the recipe name is here, which is given like the same project name hyphen recipe. You can change it. You can reuse existing recipe and other stuff. For this demo, we will be creating everything from scratch. So I'm just creating a new recipe and I'm giving the name, the default one. Now, you will see an option of dataset, sample files, and new dataset. My dataset, I can see the value because I've already tried a demo 2 hours ago, so I can see a dataset. But for this one, I'll create a new one, okay? As soon as I click on the dataset, you will see a wide range of options are available, as we spoke about. S3, Redshift, JDBC, data catalogs, all glue tables, AppFlow, Snowflake. Those are the different wide range of different source that's possible. You can also see some dynamic dataset parameters, right? Based on the regex, you can have the CSV, kind of thing in parent folder or in subfolder. So if you, let's say you want to provide multiple different files, the new files which keep adding, you can use like a regex kind of thing. You can add the number of files to include, exclude, those kinds of additional configuration you can do in a real when you're working on it, right? For now, we will be doing a simple stuff. We will be just provide a logical name for the data set. Next, we will be doing is we'll be providing the source for S3. Now there is one way. Either you can go and get a prefix from your S3 bucket. Okay, so you can get a prefix from here. Or what you can also do is you can go into your list. So here, this is a bucket what we have used. IAM stack. If I click on this bucket, you will see automatically there is a raw data set. If I click on that, this is a CSV file. Now it's saying, okay, what kind of file have you provided? CSV according to us, but you can change JSON, Parquet, Excel. You can preview the data. You can select the kind of a deeliminator for CSV. Those kinds of operation you can do. You can also say the column header value, treat first row as header or add default. Default means, let's say if you don't have an header, then can you add a default like column_1, column_2, those kinds of things you can do. You can also provide this sampling of it. Like sampling is like, okay, how many number of rows from the data set you want to analyze. It's first 50,000, 2,500 or cost any sorts of custom size. For now, we will be keeping 500. Tags to uniquely identify that this DataBrew or this particular data set belongs to what. So those kinds of detail, uniquely identifying it, the standard one what we have for other services. And then you provide the IAM permission. Now this IAM permission is for to ensure that the S3 bucket which we have created, the file we have uploaded, the same file which DataBrew will be analyzing it. So and DataBrew needs a permission to get that file from S3. That's what we are creating. We'll click next, create project. As soon as I'll click on the create project, you will see a kind of a launch bar that comes up and the default recipe. This launch bar behind the scene, you can see a different status. Provision computes. As I mentioned, DataBrew is a serverless thing. But you from this messaging itself, it's very clear that behind the scene, it provisioned the compute to analyze your data set to understand. So far we have uploaded a 2.6 MB of data, which it will try to spin the infra, download the data from S3, understand that data, and as well as process that data so it can store in a grid format. So if you follow this messaging, you will clearly understand the kind of different activities that are conducted by DataBrew. So you would have seen first, it's launching the compute. Now it is initiating the sessions. The sessions will be soon ready. Now it is showing data frame, preparing a data frame of it. So it's analyzing your data and creating a data frame so it can render it. So keep following the different status. Now it's retrieving the data sample. So after analyzing or putting that entire into data frame, now it is trying to retrieve the data sample of it. The sample is what we define in the sampling, which is 500. And now it's creating the statistics of it, like analyzing it. Okay, how many is the missing values? What are different columns? And once it is done, you will see a kind of a 100% progress. And let me close this. 100% progress, and you'll see this kind of a view which shows grid. This is called as a grid view. Okay, the by default is a grid view which shows all of your columns. Like totally there are like around 41 columns what I had in this MB in this small data set. So 500 rows is what we selected, and this it will show you every details of that particular data frame, like what kind of column it has, how static it is, right? It is mean, medium, those kinds of distinct values, unique values, those kinds of detailed analysis it provides at the start itself, right? So that's one. If I walk you through the console, here are the different transformation, the basic one which I mentioned, right? 250 plus. That's what you can easily do here with help of this different transformations. This is a lineage to understand, which we will explore later. This is a recipe section, as I think by now you will be pretty clear what is recipe. So this is a recipe section. If let's say you want to understand the schema part of this, so you click on the schema. So here you can see the schema of it, right? The schema is actual like representation. Okay, what is in column, the size of the column, I mean the type of the column, the quality of the column, if there is any kinds of a range, then what's the value distribution, and those kinds of things you can do. You can also, after you analyze it, you can also ensure that either you can disable this or enable this, right? This ensures that whether you want to include this data in your entire preparation or not. So let's say what happens, right? Generally, when you import the entire data, you get, let's say, 500 columns. But when you're creating or processing that data, you don't need all the 500. There are certain, let's say, 30, 40 columns which are like just holding some system values. You really don't need them. So you can just disable those particular columns from here. You don't need to delete from raw data set, nor you have to worry about it. Okay, here I have to process that entire larger volume, and couple of columns doesn't even make sense. So you can directly hide from here, and DataBrew will ensure that those columns are not considered or they are skipped while processing it without affecting the raw source. And then finally, what we'll do is, this is a schema. Now we understand the columns, name, the data type, and the quality. We will be doing a profile of that data. As I mentioned, profile is to analyze your data and give a kind of heat map or correlation to understand how your data looks like, what is the quality, mismatch, those kinds of different things it will do. So what we'll do next is we will click on run data profile, which will create a job. Now this is not there are two types of job which are available in DataBrew. One is the normal project job or recipe, I would say, and second is the profile job. So profile job is to analyze your entire data set, and the another job is to execute a recipe on your data set. So please do remember that there are two types of jobs are there. So from the name itself, we see that it is given DataBrew demo data set, which is a name, and the profile. You can again change it however you want. I will not have to just have, okay. You can either do it on custom or you can do it full. For the demo, I'll just make it like 500, the same value for now. You can see the data set, it will execute against the same data set what we have provided from this particular location. Also, you can store the output of your profiling. So profiling is very helpful to understand how your data set is evolving. Evolving is changing iteratively, right? Let's say today it's 50% accuracy quality. Tomorrow it's 70%. If you want to track everything, you can have that output store in a very meaningful fashion from where you can do the same, right? So this is an output value where you can track or save your entire file, which will store in a form of a JSON file format. So you can click on browse. This is the bucket what we have created. You can select this bucket, and then you can add, if you want to add a folder name, you can do it. If not, that's fine. Okay, so I've given the output. I've just mentioned profiling output to track everything very cleaner way in the S3 bucket. You can provide additional configuration to optimize your runtime of profiling. I'll just to call out, profiling is a very expensive operation. Expensive in terms of the time because it's going to analyze your entire data set and create a kind of very meaningful outcome of it. So ensure that how you try to optimize your entire long runtime, and it's only targeting the actual column which is required, the number of rows. Like if your rows, in let's say out of you have 1 million rows and 500 or 1000 or 5000 is like a sufficient to analyze your entire data set, go for that instead of full scan, because the more you try to optimize your runtime, it will be run faster as well as the cost will be less. So from that perspective, please ensure that you provide the optimal kind of an analysis and other details to the data. So we'll keep this as it is default. You can also provide additional details like if what timeout, do you want to have auto retry, do you want to enable the logs in CloudWatch to track? Those are the additional job settings you can do. As I mentioned previously also, right? You can also provide schedulers, right? You can create new, schedules different when you want to run this. You want to run every hour, every day. Those kinds of scheduling of the jobs also you can do. Finally, you can tag it. And at the last, you provide the IAM role for this particular job. And you click and create a run job, right? So this for sure will take somewhere around 3 to 4 minutes to understand how your data look like and other stuff. Since we are given a smaller 500 rows itself, so it should be faster, right? But in meantime, what we can do is we can go to the different project. If I go back, and this is a project which I've created, right, for that understanding itself. And if I just show you, this is the same data set by, if I call it out, this is the same data set what we have worked. And if I just see the profile of it, so it's just refreshing its profiling part of it. So if I just go to the column statistics and other thing, right? So as I mentioned, this was the run which I had like few hours back on the entire 20,000 rows, right? So it shows this is the same data set which we are currently analyzing, and the job is running behind the scene for another job. This is another one which I've done for a demo. You can see the kind of the entire statistics, right? The number of rows, 20,000, there are 41 columns are there, 39 are integer, one is the string column, the validation, valid cells are 56%, missing cells are 44, duplicate, there are 0 duplicates, and all are like all 20,000 are validated in terms of the duplicacy data, right? The compare distribution values, what you can see, the other kinds of column summary, So those are kind of different things what you have. And if you just go to the column statistics, you can also verify the entire value, the unique count, the value distribution, data insights. Those are the details what you do without writing a single line of code. So far, we have just click on this entire console and provide the right data set. We have not developed a single line of code for doing all this analysis, right? You can see that so good the services that you have given everything what is required for any machine learning or any data analyst to understand the data without doing any sorts of transformation on the raw data itself so far. So if you go back to our project, which we are currently doing, hopefully I think the profile job would be in place by now. I want to continue with the same thing. So it's just refreshing it. It's not processing again. The things are already pretty good. So that's why you saw it was faster. And if I click on the profile, so as you can see, it just got done in 3 minutes. 3 minutes ago, it's finished. And you can see the same trends, right? Since we have used less number of rows, you can see the validate cell is a larger proportion compared to the previous. It depends on the number of rows, right? It's a quite variable thing. So this is 59% valid. Its duplicate value is 0. This is a heat map to analyze, right? Across column versus another column, how the proportion is, the distribution, and the column statistics, the same thing, right? So far we have also able to successfully run the profiling on that stuff. Now we will go back to our project and we will be looking forward towards defining a recipe. So what we'll do is, right, first the current one is a very blank recipe which we already have as a part when we created the new job. Now for the demo, I've created a very simple recipe. I'll explain you what exactly that recipe is. Let me import that. Okay, so I've given a name of that recipe. And very simple, to go to recipe, you have to just click on recipes from the left navigation and it will automatically point to here. Once you provide the recipe, you have to click on this recipe, and don't worry, this recipe also will be part of the same GitHub repository. Again, you can tag and you can click on create. Okay, so it's already there. Let me just give another name. Okay, so we have created DataBrew-demo2-recipe. And again, just to call it out, why here you can see that, okay, hey, it gave you an error, but I don't see any recipe is because the by default recipe which was created with the job is also having the same name, DataBrew-demo, which is a job name which is a project name -recipe. So that's why it gave a conflict error. Now we have already created or defined a recipe. If you want to understand the recipe, let me switch over towards this recipe, right? So this is the structure of the recipe. So recipe which I imported is the same, this recipe. You can see this is like a JSON file where you have a different JSON object, and each JSON object holds your operation, like what kind of operation you're doing. The format is the same, right? Across all the different JSON objects, it first provides under action what kind of operation it is. Are you formatting a date? Are you lowercasing, fill with custom values, split columns? So those kinds of different operation, rename, replace with custom, those kinds of operation what you do. Second, you provide the source column, right? In case of format date, what is a source column and what is a target format? So this parameter option will vary from operation to operation. Here, as you can see, there are two things what is required for format date. If the next JSON object which I see the lowercase, you can only need column because you don't need to do it. It's pretty simple. If I take the third one, which is fill with custom, here you will see a different thing. Column data type, source column, and with what value you want to do, right? So the parameters will clearly vary from operation to operation, but at the high level, things remains the same. The recipe is a file which holds a different JSON object. Each JSON object holds operation and list of parameters to conduct that operation on that specified column. So that's a recipe, right? Now what we'll do is we'll go back to our project. So here you can see there is already a recipe. As I mentioned, DataBrew-demo-recipe is already there, which was created as a by default when you created the job. Now, once you click on this 3 dots more option, you can import a recipe. Okay, this is a recipe which we have created like 2 minutes back from the published time. You can verify it. You can click next, and here exact the same thing. That was a very complex JSON structure. For the folks who don't know JSON, it sounds very complex, but in a very simple, easier way, if you want to understand what that recipe will be doing, here is that interpretation, right? These are the steps, 9 steps, what that recipe will be the instructions have been coded in the recipe. Change format of date to this particular format, change state column to lowercase, change missing values for death probability, probable, hospitalized with 0, split the column into date with date underscore 1, 2, 3, rename it year, month, and date, and replace invalid value with March in month. So those kinds of different operation it will be doing. Please ensure, and again, you can track your entire code repository in GitLab, GitHub, and all. Similarly, you can define the different versions also of the same recipe. So if there is, let's say your file keeps changing with some small changes, you don't have to worry about it. Of redefining everything, you can just redefine the new version and set that version of recipe instead of creating the process entire start from DataBrew, right? There are two options of import: append and override. Very simple to understand. Append will append with the existing one. Now here you can see the existing one is already 0. As I mentioned, this was a default blank which was created, or you override. Please ensure that if you're already having a working one, don't try to append. Otherwise, it will just perform the same action again, and it may lead to inconsistency in the data set based on the type, what kind of operation you're doing. If you're doing some arithmetic, it may be a problem. If you're trying to do some sort of renaming or some sort of a format conversion, then that's fine because it's already formatted. It's not going to make any change. So do ensure that, right? So I'll ensure override. I'll select an override one and click on next. As and when I click next, you will see the recipe start performing or start the import option. And how the import will work, it will start validating that against the existing data set. Okay, once I click on import, you can see by default, with the single fraction of second, this entire date column got split into 3, which was easy to understand. And as well as if I just close this, you will see some other lowercase, the entire state column got lowercase. So those are the different things that took place, and this is how we ensure that recipe worked very well. When we were imported, all the things were green, that and also we verified from the data set itself, right? Next, in order to automate this entire process, we will be creating the jobs here. So this is the job for executing the recipe on a constant basis, not for the profiling purpose. Okay. So after I click on the job, I can give a name like how we are doing so far. Right, so I've given a data job. I've given the recipe. The recipe we know that, okay, associated recipe is this because we have override the existing recipe. We have given that this is a data set. Now, what we will be doing, we can provide different kinds of output. Like as I mentioned in the first slide also, there are different things where you can provide as a destination. Destination is like, okay, after recipe is executed, where I need to store that data. So you can store into S3 in your data lake, you can store into Redshift, JDBC, data catalog, or even Snowflake, right? So multiple internal and external connectors are provided from a destination. As well as you can store into different file formats, CSV, Parquet, Glue Parquet, ORC, JSON. The best thing you can see is Tableau Hyper, right? So that's exactly what we look for. Let's say, as I mentioned, that this is a tool for data preparation, right? So now you can also connect it with QuickSight. Similarly, if you have Tableau and Tableau Hyper, you can connect with Tableau's and the output in a very Tableau specific format, Tableau extract format, which you can plug with Tableau. So that also is possible. You can do with Tableau Hyper and all other things. We'll go with CSV for now. From a delimiter perspective, you can use anything like colon, comma, semicolon, whatever standard, as well as you can compress it like with Snappy, ZZip. So if you're using, let's say if you have very, like since it is a smaller data set, I'll keep this as it is default. But if you have very larger data set, let's say billions and about trillions of records, please do ensure you select either Evro, ORC, or Parquet kind of a format, which is very compressed, as well as you, from a compression perspective, select the right compression that will give you more optimal performance in the downstream. Let's say if you're processing this data with Spark or any big data framework, the results will be very good. So do ensure that. Now, We'll keep, as I mentioned, we'll keep everything same. I'll select the same bucket. First, I've given is a raw file. Second, I've given a profile output. Now I'm giving the final output. The same thing, I provided this. Okay. And again, don't worry, this folder does not exist in my S3 bucket, but automatically Glue will create, DataBrew will create it when it's uploading the file. You can given all the option that you can encryption the output file if you want, from if it is in sensitive or regulatory data. You can retry, you can give a job timeout. Those kinds of additional thing what you can do around the same. You can schedule the same option which we have seen in profiling job. And when we studied about introduction, the same what you can do, you can define to schedule the job. You can tag. We'll leave everything as default. The only thing we'll provide is the IAM role here, and click create and run job. So once you click and create and run job, this by default, it will take the data set, execute a recipe, and finally load that data into the destination. In our case, the destination is S3 bucket, but it can be anything when you're working in a real example. This job will generally take somewhere around 1 to 2 minutes around to do. In meantime, let's switch back to our presentation. We can quickly recap what we have done. So we have done the prerequisites where we have just downloaded the data set, the CloudFormation template. And once all those things were done, we have deployed the CloudFormation stack. This is the frequent role what we have leveraged. I mean, the value would have obviously changed. This is a role which we have used throughout a lab. This is the same bucket which we have used throughout the lab. So that's prerequisites. Then what we have done the next is we have defined the project as we have done like a DataBrew-demo. That was a project we have defined. Then we have defined the data set, the same name DataBrew-demo-data set, and we appoint to S3 where we have our entire CSV store, as well as the IAM role, which we deployed via CloudFormation. And this is the same S3 bucket which got deployed in the prerequisite step. Then we we created the data set, and we created the project, which start analyzing the entire thing in behind the scene. As I mentioned, launching the infrastructure, analyzing the data frames, and finally doing statistics and those kinds of analysis on the data set. Finally, once the data and entire analysis was done by DataBrew, you got an option to understand the different views, like grid view in terms of the grid metrics and all. Schema, you can get different kind of schema. And the last one was the profiling, where we execute the different analysis to examine the statistically how to summarize the data and all. It's something, this similar kind of an output what we have done. Right? So column statistics and all. Finally, then we jump on to create the kind of a recipe, which is more around dealing with the transformation, that what kind of different operation you want to do. So we went to the recipe, we defined the recipe from the existing one. We analyze that recipe and apply that recipe on the data set and ensure that we either select or append and override, but be very cautious while selecting any of the options. And finally, we have created the DataBrew job, which will be streamlining or automating this entire process of getting the data set, getting the recipe, and finally executing that recipe and saving the output. So this is kind of an output which gets saved, which we will be looking at now. And last, you can see the lineage here, right? So last two things, we'll go back to here. As you can see, the recipe jobs is created. You can simply go on the job from the left navigation. You can see the DataBrew job is what we created. Okay, and this is succeeded a minute ago. This is a job input project. This is a data set recipe, right? So as I mentioned, 4 things what we need to work with DataBrew, which you can simply interpret it from here. You need a project, you need a data set, you need a recipe, and you need an output. Source. So if I recall that entire overview slide, you had a source, you had a DataBrew at the center, the different kinds of recipe you want to execute, and at the LAT as a destination. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are the 4 things what you need here. And finally, the output gets saved and the kind of an S3. So this is a location in a CSV format. So if I directly click on here, which will point to the same S3 bucket, it stores the entire output S3. So same S3 will be there. So we can see here, right? So it is pointing you to the final output. As I mentioned, the folder, even if it doesn't exist, the folder will be created by default when the file gets saved. So this is a file which got saved. This is the entire thing, right? This is the output what we have. If I click on this, we can query it with S3 select. The CSV, comma separated, the standard one, right? Run SQL query, the by default one, limit 5. I'll just have a formatted, and you can see this is a formatted output what we have. So you can ensure that the things what we have done in DataBrew it in a recipe, like splitting the date column into year, months, date, lowercase the state volume. In that probably we have replaced all the kind of missing values with 0. Same for hospitalized, we have changed with 0. Those kinds of operation what you can see is getting permuted here, and finally the output has been ready without a single line of code. That's more important to understand, that we have in the entire demo what we had, we have not written a single line of code. Everything was very click based here and there on the UI, and your proper understanding of the data set. Once you have the proper understanding of data set, you have a knowledge of how what different options are there on the brew. That is as easy as to do that operation, right? So this is the final output which also got saved. If I just take you the quick view. So this was a raw data set which we uploaded to DataBrew. This was a profiling output, the entire analysis of the data. This was a final output which you can plug to your machine learning models, to any activities like BI reporting to machine learning, or any sorts of activity which you want to do. At the last, we'll try to look into the lineage part of it. So for that, you need to click on this job. As you click on this job, you will be entered into another job detail console where you can get this job details, where since we have not defined the schedule, you will see an empty. So these are the different details what we provided. And if you click on the next tab, you will see data lineage. This is the exact lineage which you get step by step, which I spoke about. This was the S3 file what we gave. This is a demo data set we created. This is a project where we plug this demo data set. This is a job which we executed. The output is stored into the S3 bucket, and this is a recipe. So there are 9 recipe steps which were executed. The job got successfully completed 4 minutes ago, and here is a final output which it got saved. A very clean, neat way to track each and every operation what we have done in last 30 minutes, right from uploading the data set from step 1 to entire persisting the output. That gives you very clear visibility. Even if let's say something goes wrong in one of the steps, you can easily identify what went wrong and how. And again, from the cloud trails, you can easily, you can analyze the different APIs, tracking and all. Those kinds of different operations you can do from a governance perspective. You want to understand who executed this job, for what reason. Those kinds of API tracking have been done. That's about more of the demo. The best thing which I love about this particular console is what's new. Sometimes it becomes very difficult to keep a track what is new in a very specific service, right? That's the best thing now AWS I can see is in the part of the console itself, you can see what new things that has come up under DataBrew that you can see listed down here, and a kind of a blog. You can directly point from blog itself, right? So that's keep you more aware about new things that are coming in that service without worrying about or going through different blog, different feeds and all under that same console where you're working in and out, right? So that's a very interesting thing, I would say. Simple but very interesting way to keep your knowledge up to date with this particular service. So that's all about what I had for today's session, right? Thank you so much for joining today's session, and hope you guys have a wonderful day. Let me now switch back to any sorts of queries or questions you guys have so far. So I see one question from Nivedita, how to start in learning AWS. Okay, that's a very good question. I would say there are a couple of tutorials I have recorded personally or with different meetups also, which is around from start, what is exactly cloud computing, what is around AWS. The best thing for you is if you go to the YouTube channel of AWS User Group India. If you search on YouTube, AWS User Group India, you would see difference of cloud practitioners sessions I've already recorded right from day 1, your first day on the cloud, to how you should look forward to different services. And I have different GitHub repository also, which I've added in the same video tutorial. That's how you can do the same way. You can learn, and as well as you can try to do hands-on with the same script which is mentioned in the GitHub. That way you will understand AWS, try hands-on, you will learn after going to the different tutorial. Any other questions?
Yeah, so guys, we are there up for this 2 minutes for the question and answer session. Afterwards, we are closing this session. I think no questions are there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining this session on this weekend date on 2nd of October. It was really a pleasure of mine for conducting the session, and thank you, Nupun, for organizing this very well. Again, it's really good to work with you each and every sessions, right? So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have any other announcement, you can go forward for that.
Yeah. So thank you guys for joining this session, and especially thanks to Sanchit for giving this awesome session. So thank you guys, and thank you Sanchit. Yeah, I think. Uh, Thank you for joining, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye, Sanchit. Thank you.